My guest today is Brandy SImms. How are you, Brandy?
I'm fine, Mark.
It's good to see you. Brandy covers a variety of sports, anything from the Redskins to the Mystics, high school sports all over Montgomery County, Maryland. I've known Brandy for quite some time. Excellent sports writer, excellent on TV. He's just a great guy, and I'm really thrilled to death to have him on here. My first question, Brandy, from Oakland, California to the DMV, you went to school at Pittsburgh, came back. What inspired you along that path to be a sports writer?
Well, we moved here from Oakland in '79. Well, the Bay Area. Actually, I was born in Oakland. We moved to Concord, which is a suburb, and we moved here from Concord in '79. And I kind of started getting into sports because I guess when I was about 10 years old or so, and I started collecting sports cards like football, basketball, and that's how I kind of learned, get familiar with football players.
Absolutely.
Now, once I moved here, I started playing sports. And, I knew I probably wouldn't be good enough to play professional sports, but I still want to be kind of connected to the sporting scene. So I figured, journalism, be like a sports journalist, that'd be a way to stay connected to sports, because I wasn't a great player. So that's how I kind of got involved in the sports. So, and then I started watching, the local news stations, and, we had some great sportscasters, Glenn Brenner, George Michael Sports Machine, James Brown. So those were kind of guys I looked up to, who were big influences on me.
Speaking of George Michael Sports Machine, that was a fantastic show. I remember that. I think it was still on when I moved to the area, and I used to watch it quite a bit. He really brought a lot to the table, and he was interesting, and his guests always like to go at it with him. So why'd you go to Pitt? Why'd you end up in Pittsburgh?
Well, I wanted to get away from the area, like I said, because I grew up in Montgomery County, and I wanted to get away. And Pittsburgh, I applied to Maryland, West Virginia, Pitt, got accepted to all three. But Pitt was kind of far away, but it was 4 hours away, as you know. And, I kind of wanted to get out of the area. And I wanted to go to a big-time school. They had a big-time, college athletics. And Pitt had that, they had a great football program. They won a national championship back in, was 77 with 20%.
76.
And I was able to get an experience of the big college NCAA experience. You get that experience under my belt.
Did you write when you were at Pitt? Did you write for a school newspaper?
We had a campus newspaper, the Pitt News. I worked for the Pitt News and also worked for the campus radio station, WPTS.
Oh, so you did them both. That's awesome.
Yes.
So you mentioned George Michael and a couple other guys. Who really shaped your career? Who was the one person that you were like, this guy is who I want to be. This is how I want to emulate my game going forward with my sports reporting.
Well, I wrote James Brown and George Michael. They wrote me back, and I guess James Brown, because he was African American, and you kind of want to look up to guys who guys you can emulate. And he was a good good role model, good guy to look up to. And he actually wrote me a letter back, and he told me I would need to get an internship. So I kind of followed his advice, and I ended up getting an internship at Fox 5. And Steve Buckhantz was the sports director there, and had some great producers, Joe Yasharoff, Paul Farnsworth, Dave Baker to kind of guide me through. So that was a great experience, working at Fox 5 as an intern in the sports department.
So did you meet James Brown after all was said and done? Have you had that?
I got a chance to meet him at the Capitol Classic one year. Yeah, that was a great, really good opportunity to meet him. Like I said, I grew up watching him on local television. And I got a chance to meet him at the Capitol Classic. I guess it was the early 90s. I want to say 1992, around that area, around that time frame. But yeah, I did finally get a chance to meet him.
Yeah, I loved him on, what was it? He was on CBS with the NFL Today show. Was it the NFL Today?
Yep, yeah. He does NFL. He's been with Fox, CBS, and he's ventured out into news, doing some news broadcasting as well. I think he's anchored the CBS Evening News, but he was a great role model to look up to.
I can imagine. I enjoy him too. So you leave Pitt and you start with WMAL in Baltimore, and you're producing the Sports Call with Ken Beatrice. Talk a little bit about that. Your first real world job.
Well, I got that job through a connection I had made earlier because I worked at a radio station. Dave Gilbert And Keith Jones, we broadcasted Seneca Valley High School football, WMAT Radio. It was located behind Watkins Mill High School. And we broadcast those games. And, and I was able, make those connections. And when I graduated from Pitt, Dave Gilbert helped me get a job at WMAL, producing Ken Beatrice's show. So that was a great experience because he was a legend. He's a broadcasting legend in DC, and to be able to work with him, kind of learn from him, I would have to call his guests. He would have guys like Charlie Casterly, who was GM of the Redskins at the time, Don Warren, who was a Redskins tight end. So, I would have to call those guys up and produce Ken's show. So it was just, a great experience to learn from a guy like Ken Beatrice.
I can imagine. You really have aligned yourself with some good people that have been instrumental. I can see, and I see it in your stuff. So, so you worked as a sports director, producer, a host. Some of the challenges you faced along the way to this point.
I guess being an African American in this industry, in the broadcasting industry, but Montgomery County, it's a great county. We have a lot of talent. But I guess being a minority in this industry is tough and trying to navigate the waters. But I haven't had too much difficulty. Like I've met some great people. I met you and some other folks. So Montgomery County, the Montgomery County sporting scene is really great because there's a lot of talent, as you know. It's known that this area is known as a basketball hotbed, but you come to find out, football, a lot of talented football players coming out of the area, and lacrosse is huge in the county. And it's a hotbed for a lot of different sports. Tennis is big too. Tennis and golf are also great sports to cover in Montgomery County.
If you think about it, you had the #1 college recruit going to Clemson this year, and Brian Bresci. You had the Tiger Woods down at Congressional was happening every year.
Right, I've covered that. Yeah.
You've got a spectacular group of high school kids coming out this year. In terms of going places. You're right. It is a hotbed. It is a hotbed. I know you won the Maryland-Delaware-DC Press Association Editorial Contest for your column on remembering Len Bias. Share a little bit about your decision to write this piece and what it meant to you to be recognized with that prestigious award.
Well, my editor at the Montgomery County Sentinel, Brian Karam, actually got me into writing sports columns. He said I should start writing columns, and I did. And that was the first column that I'd written, Mark, on remembering Len Bias, and then won a first place award, which I was honored and humbled to win that award. But Brian got me into writing columns, and I started writing columns for the Montgomery County Sentinel. But it was just a great honor to be recognized for that column. What
would you highlight in your article? Do you remember back that far?
Yeah, I remember the day he died because I was 17 years old at the time. I remember calling my friend Chris Lashir, calling and telling, sharing the news with him. He couldn't believe it. It was just hard to believe at that time because Len Bias was so revered in this area. He had just gotten drafted the day before by the Boston Celtics. 2 days later, he's gone.
Right.
It was just shocking news for everybody to digest.
What's been your favorite level to cover to this point? Pro, college, high school, and why?
Well, I like the high school level because you get to see guys mature and develop from high school to the pros. I've covered, I think Montgomery County, Darnell Dockett was the first kid I covered from high school who made it to the pros, and he was drafted. I was at his draft party. His father, or his uncle, Kevin and Tony Dockett, they had a draft party at their home in Burtonsville, and I went to that. I think we waited like 3 rounds. I think he wasn't drafted until that evening. So all day, I think it was like an all-day affair for him to get drafted. And, that was just a great experience, sharing his experience with his family and friends that day.
I love looking at tape of Dockett. When I was coaching, that would be some instructional tape we'd show kids on the D line, and he was just a man amongst boys. And then, later on,
he was phenomenal.
They built that new school down there at Paint Branch High School, and I thought it was incredibly awesome of him to put the turf field in. That was just something special. I I love those kinds of stories, and I've said this before on other podcasts. We don't hear enough about guys that give back. We only hear about the things that they do that are wrong or questionable. But there's so many great guys out there, and he's a typical example of somebody who, I mean, that was over $1 million he gave for that field.
Yeah, and he's coaching his son's Pop Warner team too. So he's still giving back to the community.
Yeah, that's an awesome thing. What did you begin covering the Skins, and what have you seen transpire since you started covering them?
Well, I started like early 90s. I came out of Pitt in 92, and I got a job with the Unistar radio network, and I covered Redskin games. This is when they still played at RFK Stadium. And I traveled down there and got to see Marcus Allen and do interviews with him and Barry Sanders.
Wow.
And like, mind you, before actually in Pittsburgh, I covered the Steelers, during the end of the Chuck Noll era.
Oh, okay.
And Rod Woodson, I was interviewing him in the Steelers locker room. So I come back home to Washington, and, I'm doing the Redskins, covering Darryl Green and Gary Clark, Dexter Manley. So and those guys are legends. I'm just like a kid on Christmas Day,
Yeah, I can imagine.
Being around those guys.
I can imagine. Who was the best interview you had out of some of those guys back in the early days?
I remember Marcus Allen was pretty cool. Marcus Allen and Barry Sanders, they were good interviews.
Barry Sanders, he was always one of my favorite guys. Actually, I was a USC fan growing up, so I love Marcus Allen. They both seem kind of quiet guys, but when they speak, everything stops to hear what they have to say. I can only imagine what it was like having conversation with them and just pulling some information out of them. That must have been pretty spectacular.
Yes, it was.
How did the Redskins get back on track, in your opinion? I mean, they've been struggling a little bit. I know they want to get back to the glory days with Coach Gibbs and the Hogs. What do they need to do? I mean, you're there. You see what's going on. You see a transformation happening again and again and again. What needs to happen there?
Well, they got a great draft in Chase Young, who I covered at DeMatha. So he's a local guy. He's going to be home. And plus, they got another local guy who I covered at Bullis, Dwayne Haskins. And I've been following Dwayne Haskins on his Instagram post, so he's working hard. So those guys are working hard. I mean, they have the talent in place, and they have a great coach in Rivera. So if they can put all that talent together, get that chemistry going, I think you're going to see some big things from the Redskins. See,
that was my next question for you. How do you like Rivera? What's your early impressions of him? Because I think he's a great coach. I think he got a lousy deal in Carolina. He was a fall guy for whatever reason.
Right. He coached, like I say, he coached Cam Newton. So Haskins is coming. Haskins has someone to look up to. Rivera's a winner. He's a leader, proven leader. So he's definitely someone who can point the Redskins in the right direction.
Yeah, let's hope it continues. I mean, he's got Jack Del Rio on that staff, who I also thought was a really good coach when he was a head coach and a defensive coordinator. So you got a lot of brilliant minds there, and you got a lot of great players. I love Chase Young. I think he's going to be a spectacular NFL player.
He's a beast. He's going to be a monster.
And they've got the makings in terms of that D-line to be really dominant up front. So you think they addressed those critical needs in the draft and free agency?
I think they did. Like I said, that Chase Young was the key component. But if they can get a big year from Chase, I mean, things got Kerrigan on that line. I mean, they've got some monsters. I think one of the national reporters said they're like a year or two away from a Super Bowl contending for a Super Bowl.
That's interesting.
I mean, like I said, they've got some good players. They got some pieces in place. If they can get everything clicking on the same page, who knows?
And they're a young group too, which is really important. You got veteran coaches, some veteran players, but more or less you are a young group. Outside of the NFC East, who's gonna be their biggest challenge in their schedule this year?
Outside of the East, okay. Outside, who's on the schedule? You got to remind me. I'm sorry.
Well, let's go back. Let's say inside the East. Who do you like inside the East? Because the Giants struggled last year. Philadelphia is a coin flip. I mean, you never know. They've got Wentz there, but he's kind of injury prone, and they brought in the kid from Oklahoma. So is he going to be the guy that steps in if Wentz goes down? I mean, who's going to?
Yeah, Philly's going to be tough. The usual suspects: Philly, Dallas is always tough with Prescott, Dak Prescott. So I mean, you know, NFC East is a very tough division. So those guys, I mean, they're going to have their work cut out for them. Have you covered many of the Cowboy Redskin, Cowboy Giant? Yeah, I've covered. Like I said, Ed and I, we covered. Ed Sheen and I, we covered some home game, Redskins home games over the. I guess I started RG3's rookie year was the first year I started covering the Redskins again, and yeah, we've covered some big games. Dallas Redskins game. That's always the biggest game on the schedule. It's like I said, it's probably the biggest rivalry in football. Dallas Redskins.
Yeah, one of them at least.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a coin flip too, and you get in that division, you just never know. You just never know. So, assuming the NFL plays this year, how do you think the Skins will fare? What do you think they'll come out as?
They might, like I said, they might be a year away, but I say if they, you know, I would say at least 500. You know, at least a 500 record, maybe if not better.
So let's switch gears a second. What was it like watching the Mystics win that WNBA last year? I know you cover them some too.
Yeah.
Can they have repeat success this year?
Well, they have. I understand. I think a couple of Tina Charles and Elena Delle Donne are not going to be able to play, so they're not going to be. And Natasha Cloud, they're not going to be at full strength. You know, they're going to be missing their top players. You know, their top three. You know, 2-3 players. So without them, it's really going to be tough.
Now, Tina Charles, the girl they just traded for, correct?
Right. They got her.
She's been instrumental. Now,
I think because of this COVID, a lot of players have opted out. And, yeah, Tina Charles, Elena Delle Donne, I think Natasha Cloud, who's been really at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think they've opted out of playing, you know, on the WNBA season. So, you know, without those girls, it's going to be really tough for them to compete.
How do you see the Wizards doing?
So.
You know they lost Bradley Beal, right?
Yeah.
Bill opted out.
I did. Yeah, like Bradley Beal. Without Bradley Beal and John Wall, I mean, it's going to be tough for the Wizards.
They almost would have been better off sitting it out and going to play those games. I forget where they were. What is it, Phoenix or somewhere? They were taking the rest of the teams to play, and
right. I think they're going down to was it Orlando?
Orlando. The playoff teams are going.
Okay.
But the other teams who did not make the playoffs are going to another location to just do some work, play some games internally, I believe, is what I read.
Yeah.
So it would have been.
It's going to be tough for the Wizards without Bradley Beal and John Wall. You know, without their top players, their top guns leading the way, it's going to be really difficult.
What are they missing on that team? Let's say they get John Wall back next year. He's completely healthy. Let's say Bradley Beal decides to sign and stay, okay? Because I know that's a point of contention as well coming up. What's that team missing? Because I really like the general makeup of that team.
I've always said you need a big man to win, a quality big man to win in the NBA. You know, they need a quality, you know, a quality big man. You know, they have the great guard play with Beal and Wall, but you need a quality big man, I think, in my opinion, a quality big man to really, you know, take it up a notch and, you know, go to that next level.
I think that they thought they had that when they had Dwight Howard. And
Dwight was a great player coming, you know, when he came into the NBA. But like I say, he's been in the league for a number of years, and he's probably a bit past his prime.
Yeah, he kind of tailed off. I think he's playing with the Lakers now, but he's not the top,
right?
One of the top guys. Because I'm a Lakers fan, but I've lost track of what the heck's going on. Ever since everything shut down, I'm just trying to get it all figured out going forward now.
A young Dwight Howard could do something, but like I say, he's I think he's a bit past his prime.
My final question for you, I ask everybody this. If you were not in sports journalism, in broadcasting, what kind of career option would you choose? What would you do? What would you do if you did not do sports, broadcasting, and journalism?
What would I do? A lot of people, when I was coming out of school, I told them I wanted to be an English major. A lot of people, teaching, I guess. A lot of people were saying I should go into teaching, so maybe I would have become a teacher, gone to the teaching profession.
I can tell you it's an interesting profession. I have firsthand knowledge, and it is trying.
I know you do.
My last thing is I do this piece called Decade Definers, and I tweak it and adjust it to my guests. So Decade Definers is a segment in which I break down individuals or teams from any sport who were marquee, and I go back to the 70s. I'm going to get you involved by having you tell me the 5 best interviews you've had covering sports, and it can be at any level.
You said the 5?
The 5 best interviews you've had.
Okay.
I'm going to make you work a little bit.
All right. Well, when I was in Pittsburgh, the Civic Arena, I'm sure you're familiar with the Civic Arena.
Absolutely.
They had the Dapper Dan Round Ball Classic, Sonny Vaccaro's game.
Yeah.
Right. One year I went there and interviewed, this was a year before the Fab Five,
yep.
Michigan Fab Five. Before they did their thing in Michigan, they were Juwan Howard, Chris Webber were in that game. Glenn Robinson. I remember interviewing Chris Webber when he was a high school senior. Glenn Robinson was also in that game. I interviewed those guys. I mean, I've done interviews with Tiger Woods. Let's see who else. Odell Beckham Jr. I've done interviews with him, and let's see. I got one more. Let me think. Who am I missing? I mean, Darnell Dockett was good. Always a good interview because he was a local guy who I followed over the years. I mean, Stephon Diggs, interviewed him over the years. Yeah.
How's his brother going to do?
Trayvon?
Yeah.
I'm excited for Trayvon. Going to Dallas? Yeah, like I said, I covered Trayvon his first high school game at Wooten. They played Damascus, and a lot of hype with Trayvon. I know a lot of the private schools were recruiting him. Gonzaga and I think the Mather were recruiting Trayvon. He ended up going to a public school in Montgomery County. But yeah, I'm excited for Trayvon. I think he's going to do well in Dallas.
It'll be interesting to see. I can't wait till he has to match up with his brother. That ought to be fun to watch. I remember
that's gonna be fun.
I remember being at Watkins Mill and Trayvon was playing receiver, and we had a kid who played corner that ended up going out west, playing in Nebraska and stuff like that. Jerron Woodard.
Yeah.
And
I remember Jerron. Yeah.
They matched up, and it was a battle all night. We ended up winning that game 10-9. 10-9. It was like a Thursday night because of a holiday the next day, and man, I was just impressed with it. And I actually stepped away from coaching the next year, so I didn't get to watch it for the next few years. And then Trayvon actually went to what was the name of that private school he ended up at?
Avalon.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been awesome to hear from you and talk some sports and just kind of pick your brain. I wish you all the best going forward. I know things are going to get started here for you real soon. So hopefully you get to get out there and cover some stuff. I'm still waiting to see what the Maryland State Education Association does with high school sports.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting this year to see what happens on the sporting scene.
Well, thanks, Brandy. You take care.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity.